From Saturday Night Live to feature films, he was over the top. His humor crude, often shameless. Chris Farley was a human beer keg, 300 pounds of rolling thunder on a 5-foot 8-inch frame.
He was hilarious. I mean, he could make a joke out of anything.
Yet beneath the rowdy exterior beat the heart of America's saddest clown. The pain of self-loathing numbed by wild binges of food, sex, alcohol, and drugs.
He goes, hey man, I buy, you fly, go get some beer.
There were no boundaries in Chris Farley's life. He played Russian roulette with his addictions.
And he said, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. And as she turned around to say goodbye to him, he collapsed and passed out on the floor.
He never got up that cold December day in 1997. Chris Farley was dead at the age of 33. In the coming hour, we'll explore the untamed life and untimely death of a popular young comic and actor who lived hard and played harder.
Chris consumed too much of everything, including life.
To many people, Chris Farley was simply one more casualty of Hollywood excess. But the fat kid who never got the girl had a heart of gold and was dearly loved by everyone who knew him. This is the story of a bigger-than-life funny man with an insatiable appetite for anything extreme. He loved his family, his friends, and his fans. The only person Chris Farley did not love was himself. This is his story. Chris Farley, the True Hollywood story.
Her life's ambition was to be a star. And
never recover from the public scandal.
Chris Farley's death in Chicago on December 18, 1997, made headlines around the world, but hit hardest in the town Chris called home, Madison, Wisconsin. Christopher Crosby Farley was born on February 15, 1964, the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. His parents, Tom and Mary Ann Farley, were devout Catholics, and Chris attended Mass every week. Chris's father was a successful contractor in Madison, and the family lived in an upscale neighborhood in this Midwest community of 200,000 people. High school football coach and guidance counselor Nick Burrows.
He'd crack me up from the beginning of the conversation to the end because he was just one of those kids that had a natural knack to make people laugh.
As a child, Chris struggled with a weight problem that also plagued his father, who eventually tipped the scales at 600 pounds. To avert the jeers of classmates, young Chris developed a simple but effective defense. His strategy was to make people laugh before they called him fatso. Chris became the ultimate class clown, but the nuns at Edgewood Grade School didn't laugh.
And so a nun was screaming at me, and remember that shampoo, G, your hair smells terrific? Well, that's what I said to her. Sister G, your hair smells terrific. She was like, what? And the class really laughed. It was like in 3rd grade.
By 1978, the lovable 14-year-old hellion entered Edgewood High School in Madison, where his jumbo size served him well. As a lineman on the Crusaders football team, a role Chris tried to beef up to impress the girls.
I remember there was about 40 seconds left in the game, and he takes off running on the sidelines. He's got a clean uniform on, dives in the mud, starts wallowing, and as assistant coaches, we're all cracking up looking at Farley do this.
When Farley was in the game, big number 59 moved with surprising agility. On field and off, Chris loved to be in the middle of the action.
All you had to do was listen for the roar of laughter, and you just look around the room and you knew Chris Farley was over there cracking everybody up. Everybody wanted to be around him because it was a good time.
And I always like to make people laugh. It makes me feel good. You know, all of a sudden you get a laugh and it's like, oh my God, something about it makes you feel good.
Despite Chris's zany reputation, his grades throughout high school were solid, good enough to gain acceptance to Marquette University in nearby Milwaukee. In the fall of 1982, 18-year-old Chris Farley enrolled at the Jesuit school, majoring in theater and communications. Michael Price, Associate Dean of the Communications Department, was Farley's advisor.
He was an outgoing, fun-loving young man, loud, liked to be liked students to laugh at him.
Price also saw the flip side of the jovial freshman, a side Chris rarely revealed.
He was a very deep and thoughtful young man, very religious, spent a great deal of time trying to answer questions for himself by going to church. So he's a little complicated. He had many sides to him.
Chris's reputation as a party animal was yet another side of his character, and often fueled Farley's passion, making people laugh. By his senior year in 1985, Chris perfected the role of bumbling oaf, and one of his many campus escapades became legendary.
Chris wanted to draw attention to a group of girls who lived in a home up on Kilburn Avenue, and so he took a smoke bomb and he set it on the windowsill and then lit it, not realizing that when he'd lit it, it would spin around and have propulsion to it, and it fell into that apartment onto one of those lovely old $35 couches that you pick up and started to burn. By this time, Chris was out of there, on his way.
Chris dodged further disasters, and in the spring of 1986, at age 22, he graduated from Marquette. That summer, Chris gained experience on the stage, performing in Madison with the Art Improv Theater Group. Then, in the fall of 1986, Farley made a decision that would change his life. When the True Hollywood story continues, Chris Farley makes the short trip south to America's hotbed of comedy.
He wanted to go to Chicago and try improvisational theater and comedy. He wanted people to laugh.
And later, Chris faces a relentless battle with multiple addictions.
Chris Farley was one of the worst addicts I'd ever met.
In 1987, 23-year-old Chris Farley moved from his home in Madison, Wisconsin, to Chicago, where he enrolled at the Improv Olympic Theater. The aspiring comedian had one goal in mind: to get on stage. Fast.
He wanted to get up now. He was actually pounding the walls, literally pounding the wall, going, "Let me up now, let me up now."
The Improv Olympic is a popular training ground for the Windy City's famed Second City Theater Group, where many of Farley's idols performed, including Bill Murray and John Belushi. Farley's demand for stage time during his first week in Chicago met with resistance from theater owner Sharna Halpern.
I said, "You know what? I'm going to let you go on my stage tonight, but if you screw up, you will never get on my stage again. Now, do you want to take that chance?" And before I finished my sentence, he was just bounding towards the stage, and he was absolutely hilarious.
Farley stole the show, and after only 1 week of classes, director Del Close was convinced Farley had a promising future.
And I sort of fixated on Chris, and I remember saying to Sharna out of the side of my mouth, "Well, here's one for Saturday Night Live."
During the intensive training program, Del Close's instructions to Chris were crude, but simple.
Del Close taught me to attack the stage like an animal. And he made he thinks, do you think that's just a analogy or whatever to kill the audience? But he says, you want to kill them. You want to make them laugh so hard that they choke on their own bomb and they have an aneurysm or something like that. He said attack the stage that hard.
And that's precisely what Farley did. His in-your-face style left audiences screaming for more.
And it's just electric to watch. It was kind of like John Belushi, that you weren't quite sure what he was doing, but you couldn't stop yourself from watching him doing it, even if it was nothing. It was just like this magnetism that you had to keep watching this guy.
People were watching, and Chris was having a ball. During his college years, Farley partied often and hard, but those days seemed tame compared to his drinking escapades in Chicago.
He was always a drinker, and he would drink too much, too fast. It would fall down the sides of his mouth. And I used to say, no one's going to take it away from you, just slow down, but it was like, get drunk as fast as possible.
As Farley's notoriety began to grow among Chicago theater goers, so did his appetite for excess: food, alcohol, and eventually drugs.
He was addicted to just about everything you can imagine. I don't think he was doing any opiates at the time, or if he was, I was not aware of it. But, you know, it's like everybody else, booze, cocaine, and marijuana.
Chris began a downward spiral with forces he could not control. But his lifestyle seemed to pay off. Audiences went wild for Chris Farley.
They loved him. He would be very honest with the audience, so you can't help but care about somebody like that.
Friend and fellow improv actor, James Grace.
He was definitely a crowd pleaser, just because of the energy and the commitment that he put into things.
After studying and performing for just 1 year at the Improv Olympic Theater, 24-year-old Farley was ready to move up the entertainment ladder. In the fall of 1988, producer Joyce Sloan of Chicago's Second City Theater Group approached Del Close to direct the company's newest production. Close agreed, under one condition.
I'd been away from Second City since '82, and I said, well, okay, but this time I get to cast it. So here's who I want. You know, Dave Pasquesi, Tim Meadows, Joel Murray, and Chris Farley. And she said, Chris Farley? Oh, God, no. You know, he's just troublemaking, drug-inhaling, drunk, anybody but Chris Farley.
But Close insisted that Chris be part of the cast, and Joyce Sloan finally agreed. After 2 months, Farley made his debut on Second City's main stage. Chris blew the audience away. In the spring of 1990, 2 years after Farley's first performance, the producers of Saturday Night Live arrived in Chicago to scout for fresh talent. But Second City's most talked-about performer was forced to sit on the sidelines.
Chris had broken his ankle or twisted his ankle, and he wasn't on stage when Saturday Night Live was looking, so I told them, just wait, he's coming back. You've got to see this guy, and you will love him.
When the E! True Hollywood Story returns, Chris Farley gets his shot at the Big Apple and national TV.
He was all out, falling down, crazy in love with life. When he walked onto a set on Saturday Night Live, we wanted him to break all the rules.
And still to come, Chris fights a desperate battle with the ghosts of his childhood.
He had admitted to us in group therapy that he had learned how to put on the clown suit at an early age to get people to like him.
In August 1990, Lorne Michaels, executive producer of Saturday Night Live, flew to Chicago to see the high-octane performer everyone was raving about, 26-year-old Chris Farley. And Chris delivered the goods, with a performance that no one would forget.
So I'm bleeding pretty bad, right? And I happen to get a little bit of red blood on his white cute smock, and he's yelling at me for bleeding. For Christ's sake, I'm in a hospital.
And I think we found another Belushi. This one's ready for Saturday Night Live.
When the new SNL TV season began in the fall of 1990, Chris Farley joined Adam Sandler and David Spade as rookie cast members. But Farley's size wasn't the only reason he stood out. Actor Brian Dennehy.
He was all out, falling down, crazy in love with life. And that's the way, when he walked onto a set on Saturday Night Live, that's what we wanted him to do. We wanted him to break all the rules.
Breaking the rules, and everything else in sight, produced inevitable comparisons between Farley and his idol, former SNL star John Belushi.
Chris's talent, as Belushi's was to come in and do something so mad and so outrageous and so crazy, and usually so violent to himself, that he just had to laugh. You know, comedy, unfortunately, has a kind of a violent side to it.
Oh, okay. He's a little... bite, yeah?
Chris honed his comic persona on SNL to sweaty, self-mocking perfection, with a range of outlandish characters, including motivational speaker Matt Foley.
You better get your act together. I know what you're thinking. I got a tie and coat, and I'm on top of the world. Look at me.
Most of Farley's characters were variations on the same theme. Lovable, wigged-out fat guys who crashed through walls, obliterated coffee tables, and faked massive heart attacks.
Help!
New York Magazine writer Chris Smith.
Chris knew that he could count on the screaming and the sweating to get the house going, and that's what he relied on.
In just one season, 27-year-old Chris Farley created some of Saturday Night Live's most memorable moments. Away from the set, he was rarely out of character.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling. Hello, my ragtime gal.
Farley friend and Chicago radio personality Mancow Muller.
He had the amazing ability to drop his pants instantly. And anyone who you'll talk to about Chris will tell you his pants dropped like that. And, you know, every restaurant, no matter, you know, how fancy the restaurant was, his pants would drop and he would fall down and everybody would laugh.
I feel more at home under the hood of an automobile than just about anywhere. What I like to do is I gather some of these lug nuts are, can I get a hacket wrench?
But no one laughed at Chris's fierce appetite for food, drugs, and his latest vice, prostitutes. In his first year on SNL, Farley's salary topped 6 figures, so money was no object, and he became a runaway freight train. When Chris began his second season of SNL in the fall of 1991, his erratic behavior began to hurt his performance. Executive producer Lorne Michaels gave Farley an ultimatum: enter a drug rehab center or be fired from the show.
Lorne Michaels, he'd been through, you know, awfulness with Belushi and some of the other cast members in terms of drugs and early deaths. He didn't want to see it happen again to Chris.
Following 3 months of treatment, Chris returned to SNL, but he continued to struggle. Dallas Taylor, former member of the rock band Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, is a drug counselor who worked with Chris.
There's this part of him that was really loving and caring and sweet. When he reverted back to the addiction, he turned, it's like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome. He turned into this paranoid, angry, hateful, you know, movie star.
Despite Farley's binges and the grind of a weekly live TV show, the comedian faithfully attended Mass at St. Malachi Catholic Church in Manhattan's Theater District. Chris also made time to volunteer in the church's visitation program for elderly parishioners. Sister Teresa O'Connell.
You could tell from his talking that he loved old people. He was just so wonderful with them. He was very anxious to do volunteer work, extremely anxious. He could do once a week, do twice a week, whenever he wanted to. And this he did faithfully, without any big deal. I mean, he really did it.
But Chris's good deeds were no match for his addictions. In 1992, at age 28, Farley again faced off with SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels. Michaels turned to Chris's good friend, actor Tom Arnold, who sought the professional advice of Dallas Taylor.
Tom called me and said that he had a friend that was on Saturday Night Live and that he was worried about and wanted to do an intervention.
The intervention process worked. Farley agreed to enter the Exodus Recovery Center in Los Angeles. After a short stay, Chris emerged with a renewed commitment to stay clean and sober. Farley's struggle with alcohol and hard drugs seemed to be under control, but nothing could stop his craving for food and prostitutes. When the True Hollywood story continues, Chris Farley takes Capitol Hill by storm. And later, the final tormented hours of Chris Farley's life.
Going on amidst this splendid environment is a party of cocaine, heroin, booze, hookers and pimps, and Chris Farley in the middle of it.
Despite his battle with alcohol, drugs, and overeating, by 1992, Chris Farley was a staple of Saturday Night Live. But after 2 seasons on SNL, The 28-year-old funny man compared the tension and the pressure of live television to being shot out of a cannon. Chris Farley was determined to follow the legacy of the big men of comedy, Jackie Gleason, John Candy, and John Belushi. All the fat comics, they're my favorites, Chris said. I watch them over and over.
I cried, I laughed, I wet my pants.
3,000 miles away, Hollywood producers were watching Farley, comic and friend James Grace.
He emulated John Belushi's career, but he wasn't being John Belushi, he was being Chris Farley. So he was just such a huge presence all the time that is, you know, we all knew that it was just a matter of time before the right person saw that and moved it along.
That move came in 1992 when Chris landed a small role in the film Wayne's World, starring self-styled party dudes Mike Myers and Dana Carvey, fellow cast members from Saturday Night Live. In 1993, Farley appeared in another small role in Coneheads, followed by Wayne's World 2, this time with a more substantial part. SNL remained Chris's bread and butter, however, and he continued to build on his stable of maniacal characters. Chris Farley's career was speeding ahead, and between 1992 and 1994, he kept his drug addiction in check. But he continued to feast on women and food. During trips to Chicago, Chris often dropped by the studio of Chicago radio jock Mancow Muller.
Is this your coat?
Chris, don't do it.
Fat guy in a little coat. Fat guy in a little coat.
Take it off, dickhead, I'm serious.
Don't worry, it fits like a... Uh-oh.
Following their mischief on the radio, Muller and Farley usually went out to eat.
Chris's eating habits were amazing. I mean, it was everything on the plate, stacked together, and he had a huge appetite for everything.
Drug counselor Dallas Taylor explains Farley's dilemma.
He felt so uncomfortable inside his own skin and his own body. Nobody likes to be fat. You know, he was afraid to lose weight because he thought that was expected of him, to be the funny fat guy.
Nice outfit. Who designed this for you? Who designed it? Rochester, big and tall. It's true.
But Chris was convinced the fat guy, no matter how funny, never got the girl, unless money was exchanged.
That'd be nice. Find a girl. Wish I had a girlfriend.
Heavyweight boxing contender Peter McNeely met Chris during one of Farley's many stays in drug treatment centers.
Women didn't want to be with Chris Farley when the lights were turned out and you got to take your clothes off and go to bed with him. And Chris Farley spent a lot of time with hookers and prostitutes and female escorts.
Comedy was his best friend and his worst enemy.
We would go out and try to pick up women together, and Chris trying to pick up women was hilarious. And it would, you know, it'd be a beautiful girl, and this woman would be very interested, and he'd be shaking her hand, and then he'd begin pounding his chest and act like he was having a heart attack and fall down on the floor, and the girl would be horrified, walk away, and he would just get nervous and blow it.
But Chris rarely blew a chance to make people laugh. And in April 1995, 31-year-old Farley took his act to Capitol Hill and lampooned Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich.
Favor? All right. Motion to change the hail to the chief to hail to the speaker, huh? All right. HR 424 to make Saturday Night Live's ratings better. All in favor? Yeah. All right, and finally, HR 631, motion to make Sonny Bono come up here and sing I've Got You, Newt. All in favor?
Chris could not convince Bono to croon for Congress, nor could he convince himself that people were laughing with him and not at him.
Ungawa, we got Winnebago power.
He felt like he had to make jokes and poke fun at himself about his weight problem to get people to like him.
In public, Chris rarely let his guard down, and despite his celebrity status, he remained the kid from Madison, Wisconsin, who never grew up.
He had no concept that he was Chris Farley. And I don't know how, he's just like anyone else that you'd meet today. He was just a regular guy, the life of the party.
When the E! True Hollywood Story returns, the fat man becomes the $6 million man.
As long as the movies kept making money, people were going to keep giving him work.
But the twin monsters of alcohol and hard drugs return with a vengeance.
The drugs and the angels and the devils, you know, they're all fighting each other, you know.
In the spring of 1995, not long after ambushing Newt Gingrich on Capitol Hill, Chris Farley completed his 4th season on Saturday Night Live. But at age 31, Farley was restless. He decided to leave SNL and once again chase the shadow of John Belushi, this time to Hollywood.
He loved and worshipped Belushi, and he'd talk about that at the drop of a hat, but the darker side of that really hadn't kicked in.
During his tenure on SNL, Chris appeared in a series of minor roles in major films. But after his move west in 1995, Farley received star billing in the Paramount Pictures film Tommy Boy. Chris's SNL sidekick, David Spade, was signed to co-star in the comedy.
He's the best. So, we have chemistry. I'll show you. We have documents to prove it. I had them with me. Scientists have signed off on this.
Fatty and skinny.
For his final season on SNL, Chris was reportedly paid $500,000. But that salary jumped to $2 million for Tommy Boy. In the film, Chris, as Tommy, sets out to save the family auto parts business following the death of his father. Critics panned Tommy Boy, but Farley was solid gold, and the movie pulled in an unexpected $32 million at the box office. Farley's father in the film, Big Tom, was played by Brian Dennehy.
The thing that Chris had that all really good actors have is vulnerability. And they're able to fake it, or they're able to display it. Chris was enormously vulnerable. Most great comic actors are. They're desperate for attention, they're desperate for approval, desperate for laughs.
Chris Farley was feeling lost. Despite a promising film career and plenty of cash, Farley met often with drug intervention counselor Bob Timmons.
I think he got to a place where he was now feeling some financial security and some recognition for his work, and felt just as, he actually felt more empty, because he realized that, you know, that was what he was reaching for, that was going to make everything okay.
To cope, Chris turned to the twin beasts he had held at bay for 2 years, alcohol and drugs. Chris knew he was dealing with forces he could not contain.
Chris consumed too much of everything, including life. He ate too much, he drank too much, he did too much drugs, he didn't sleep enough, he didn't take care of himself.
The constant I hear with people like me, addicts and alcoholics, is that there's a underlying sense of self-hatred.
Chris searched his soul for an answer, drifting in and out of treatment centers during 1995 and 1996. Boxer Peter McNeely spent many hours in rehab with Chris.
His history from repeated attempts to clean himself up in rehabilitation, I mean, it showed that he had a serious problem and that he was wrestling with it and grappling with it.
Chris was losing his private war, but he continued to be a winner at the box office. From 1996 to 97, Farley appeared in a succession of films, including Black Sheep with David Spade and Beverly Hills Ninja for a cool $6 million fee. But Farley never took his celebrity status seriously.
I told you to leave me alone! Sorry, baby.
What is wrong with these people?
I don't know.
You can't even go shopping in Beverly Hills
Well,
without
they're
being
all
attacked
these
for
kids.
autographs.
Look, they're nice guys, but they bug me.
Chris rarely took anything seriously, including his weight, which ballooned to 300 pounds by early 1997.
It's some nice stuff up there, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
It's not a big and tall store.
I can't buy off the rack, Dave. You know that.
Farley's consumption of alcohol and drugs kept pace with his eating habits, but somehow Chris pulled himself together when the cameras rolled. Christopher Guest directed 33-year-old Farley in the film Almost Heroes.
He was extremely well prepared. He would show up every day knowing exactly what was going on and was serious about his work. And he wanted to be an actor as well as just a guy rolling down a hill.
But away from the set, Farley was going nowhere. Despite his own pain, Chris cared deeply about helping others and often participated in charity food drives. He was especially sensitive to those who were down and out.
And he would drive his black Cadillac into Venice, pick up pretty much a homeless crack cocaine 20-year-old and take him to a 12-step meeting and buy him dinner. But he had that, that was very genuine. There was no, nobody knew he was doing all of that.
Chris also gave generously to St. Monica's Church in Santa Monica, volunteering for a chili cook-off at the annual summer festival in 1997. But when the laughter stopped and the crowd disappeared, Chris pleaded with Father Roca for help.
What I ask of you right now is to just pray for me. Pray for me that I can get through this. And so, he left me with high hopes that he was able to hopefully beat what he had, what was challenging him at that time. And so we left that with my saying, well, Chris, you're definitely going to be in my prayers. The best of luck to you.
When the True Hollywood story continues, Chris Farley tempts fate one last time.
It was nonstop booze and drugs every hour.
By 1997, 33-year-old Chris Farley, the overweight, insecure kid from Wisconsin, was a movie star. But privately, Farley was suffering and seemed bent on self-destruction.
For Chris, in every sense of the word, he just never could get enough life of all parts. And ultimately, it was just too much for him.
In November 1997, Chris Farley left his Chicago apartment to once again enter a drug treatment center. And once again, he failed miserably. Drug counselor Dallas Taylor.
I won't mince words with you. I think Chris Farley was a tremendous talent. But Chris Farley was one of the worst addicts I'd ever met.
On November 28th, Farley checked out of rehab and returned to Chicago and to his old ways. That December, Chris went on an epic binge of food, prostitutes, alcohol, and drugs. Friend Sharna Halpern.
He was about to get ready to do another movie, and they do a drug test. So very soon, he was going to have to be totally straight.
Walking the straight and narrow was the last thing on Farley's mind. And on Thursday, December 11th, Chris was seen chugging beer after beer at the Lodge, a popular Chicago pub. The hard drinking continued over the weekend. But true to form, Chris attended 7 p.m. Mass that Sunday, December 14th, at St. Michael's Church.
There was a big part of him that believed in God, but unfortunately he believed that he wasn't going to be ever forgiven for all the things that he did.
Apparently, that was indeed Chris's state of mind. And following Mass, he joined friends for dinner and drinks. Alan Salkin reported on Farley's exploits for the New York Post.
He started on Sunday night having a huge dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, which is in the basement of his building where he lived, the John Hancock Tower in the Miracle Mile in Chicago. He was known to frequent this place regularly, run up bar tabs of about $70.
Following dinner, Chris made the rounds to several hip Chicago night spots, including Heaven on 7 and Crowbar. Farley then reportedly returned to his apartment and snorted cocaine until dawn. After sleeping most of Monday, Chris was ready to party. That evening, he went on the prowl again. More booze, more drugs, more food. In the pre-dawn hours of Tuesday, December 16th, Farley decided it was time to add a woman to the mix.
He called up, supposedly called up a call girl who told one tabloid TV show that She went up there. They did not have sex. He supposedly asked her for cocaine. She did an intimate dance for him, hung out with him for a few hours, and then left.
That evening, Chris began another round of club hopping. Then at 1:30 a.m., Farley hit his favorite after-hours spot, the Hunt Club.
He walked in and said to the waitress, "Hello, lovely lady, can I have a Jack and Coke?" At one point, a group of strippers who were in the bar that he didn't come with then started gathering around him and cooing and doing various things like that.
Farley loved the attention, but he was a physical wreck.
The cocktail waitress who served him told me that she felt bad about serving them. They had a policy of not serving people who were drunk, but that they felt they had to because he was famous and things like that.
When Chris left the Hunt Club at 3:30 a.m. on Wednesday, December 17th, the non-stop party continued at a home in the trendy Lincoln Park neighborhood. The next 24 hours in Chris Farley's life became the subject of intense media scrutiny. What really happened was uncovered by reporters for Globe and shared with the mainstream press. L.A. Bureau Chief Marianne Norbaum.
He was at a party and asked one of his friends there to get him a girl. That friend called Heidi.
Heidi Hauser, an exotic dancer, arrived at 10 a.m.
Heidi met Chris at a very upscale Chicago home, and going on amidst this splendid environment is a party of cocaine, heroin, booze, hookers and pimps, and Chris Farley in the middle of it. He was doing cocaine, snorting it and smoking it. He was snorting heroin. He was ingesting liquid G, which is some sort of drug that is supposed to give you a fast high but no hangover the next day. He was drinking tremendous quantities of vodka.
By 12:30 p.m., Heidi and Chris were ready for a change of scenery.
After a number of hours of partying at the Chicago home, Chris and Heidi got into her car and drove to her apartment about an hour outside of the city.
On the way to Elk Grove Village, Chris and Heidi stopped to stock up on food and booze. Soon after their arrival, at approximately 2:30 p.m., Chris made a phone call to arrange for a drug delivery of crack cocaine and heroin. 6 hours later, at 8:45 p.m., Chris called for a limousine. Moments later, Farley and Heidi were on their way to Chris's apartment. At 10:05 p.m., they arrived at the John Hancock Center on Chicago's posh Michigan Avenue.
They went up into his apartment, just the two of them. Chris consumed more cocaine, drank more vodka, and talked a little bit about his life.
At 3 a.m. on Thursday, December 18th, after 17 hours of partying, Heidi was exhausted.
She told him, "I need to get going." And they walked through the foyer of his apartment, and he said, "Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." And as she turned around to say goodbye to him, he collapsed and passed out on the floor. So those were his final words to stripper Heidi Hauser, "Please don't leave me." Heidi thought Chris had simply passed out. Heidi went home in the limousine, that same limo that had just hours earlier carried she and Chris together.
But Chris never got up. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, December 18, 1997, the lovable comic was found by his brother John. Chris was sprawled in his apartment entryway, clad only in his pajama bottoms. He had been dead for several hours. When the True Hollywood story returns, the mystery surrounding Chris Farley's death is revealed, and family and friends say goodbye.
He was embarrassed about his size, and yet he made sure that all of us that knew him well got to see him naked at least once.
He made millions of people laugh with his fatty falls down humor. But on December 18, 1997, the fat guy fell for the last time, and all the laughter turned to tears. 2 months shy of his 34th birthday, Chris Farley died alone and lonely, a sad, lovable clown who could never escape the pain of self-rejection. Soon after Chris's body was found in his Chicago apartment, Father Michael Roca called the Farley home in Wisconsin.
Obviously, it was a family who was in great distress, and they were, incredibly shaken.
When the autopsy report was made public, speculation that Chris had committed suicide or that he died of a heart attack proved false. The cause of death was the result of a massive drug overdose. On December 23, 1997, a private funeral was held for Chris Farley at Our Lady Queen of Peace Church in Madison, Wisconsin.
The family hired a lot of security to keep the press away, but from the vantage point that they were allowed to have outside the church, they noticed lots of famous Saturday Night Live people from the past and from the current cast.
3 weeks later, on January 12, 1998, a public memorial service was held at St. Monica's Catholic Church in California. Father Michael Roca led the service.
And now he's in heaven, in one of those rooms that we hear about in that gospel. You can hear the angels laughing right now because of him. I don't think God can keep a straight face anymore. He's probably knocking down things that haven't been touched in millions of years.
Chris's close friend, Tom Arnold, then delivered the eulogy.
When people pass away, we talk about a flame burning out, but with Chris, it was more like a forest fire. I believe that Chris is in a better place, a place full of love, with no fear, no critics, a place where he can love himself. So long, Chris. We'll miss your laugh and your beautiful blue eyes, and most of all, we'll miss your humanity. Thank you.
Perhaps the most poignant requiem to this comic heavyweight was a simple prayer, a copy of which Chris carried in his wallet for years. Chris's brother John brought many in the hushed gathering to tears with his emotional rendition of a clown's prayer.
We can only imagine our God of love saying to Chris, as you stumble through your life, did you create more laughter than tears? Dispense more happiness than gloom? Did you spread more cheer than despair? And in your final moment, did you hear me whisper, when you made my people smile, you made me smile? Chris, do you love me? We can only visualize Chris responding with a smile and a flash of his brilliant eyes, yes. And God taking Chris by the hand, saying to him, my child, you can come home now. You can come home.
Little buddy, go get some coconuts, Gilligan. I'm not book smart. I don't read well. I sweat when I have to do work with my brain. When the camera's on, you see the light above the bulb, and you gotta do little dance every now and again to get them going. Oh my God. Oh.